There are afternoons so quiet that the world seems to hold its breath. The sunlight softens, spilling gently across the porch, and the only sound is the faint chirping of birds settling into the evening. I remember one such afternoon, sitting by my window, watching Mrs. Helen, my neighbor, at her small wooden table. She was 75, her hands trembling slightly as she held a pen over a blank sheet of paper. Her eyes, though, were bright, searching, as if chasing something lost long ago. Curious, I walked over and asked what she was doing. She smiled, a smile both tender and tinged with sadness, and said, "I'm writing a letter to my children. But I'm not sure I'll send it." I pulled up a chair beside her, and she began to share her story. She told me how, years ago, her children used to call every week, like clockwork. Their voices over the phone, their laughter, their simple questions about her day or her health, they made her feel like the heart of the family. But somewhere along the way, those calls grew rare. Weeks turned into months, and sometimes, she'd go a whole season without hearing from them. She didn't blame them. She understood they had their own lives, jobs, kids, worries she remembered all too well from her own younger days. But deep down, there was an ache, a quiet emptiness, as if a piece of her had been left behind. I asked her, "Why don't you call them?" She shook her head, her eyes flickering with hesitation. "I don't want to be a burden. I'm afraid they'll think I'm needy, or that I can't manage on my own." Her words hit me, because maybe you felt it too, that silent loneliness, not from being alone, but from the invisible distance that grows between hearts. Mrs. Helen wasn't alone in this. I've met so many people over 60, 70, parents who quietly face this shift in their relationships with their children. It's not a lack of love, but life moves fast, pulling everyone in different directions. What struck me about Mrs. Helen, though, was that she didn't choose to sit in that silence, waiting for things to change. She decided to do something, however small, to bridge that gap. That unsent letter was her first step. I still remember her eyes that day, steady and resolute, as she said, "I'm not writing to complain. I'm writing to remind myself that I can still start over." Her words stayed with me, because they made me realize that growing older doesn't mean stepping back. It means living with intention, with heart, in rhythm with who you are. Maybe you've wondered, too, how do you hold on to the closeness with those you love, when time and distance seem to pull you apart? That afternoon, as the sun dipped lower, I stayed with Mrs. Helen, listening as she spoke. She talked about the old days, when her kids were little, when every dinner was a story, a moment shared. But she didn't linger in nostalgia. She spoke of what she wanted to do now, how she wanted to show her children she still loved them, not through obligatory phone calls, but through simple, meaningful acts. She said there were 5 ways she'd learned, 5 ways that people like her, and like you, could reconnect with their children and grandchildren, not by forcing it, but by opening their hearts. I asked her if I could share her story, not just because it touched me, but because I believe there's someone out there, maybe you, searching for a way to mend those quiet rifts, to love again, to feel less alone. In this video, I'm going to walk you through those 5 ways, the ones Mrs. Helen and others have used to bring their families closer, to make their hearts beat in sync again. These aren't rigid rules or empty advice. They're stories, moments, lessons I hope will spark something in you. Before we go further, I want to ask you to do one small thing. If you've ever felt that distance with your children or grandchildren, leave a comment below, just saying, "I understand." It lets me know this story is reaching the right people. And if you haven't subscribed to Elderly Wisdom yet, hit that button to join us as we explore ways to live more beautifully every day. Mrs. Helen's story didn't end with that letter. It began with a simple, powerful choice, to put her feelings into words, not to demand attention, but to understand herself and her children better. And from that choice, she found the first way to reconnect, not by waiting, but by opening her heart. As the afternoon faded into dusk, I sat with her, listening to how those words on paper became the start of something new. Let's step into that journey together, beginning with the lines she wrote in the stillness of that quiet afternoon. As the afternoon light faded, I sat with Mrs. Helen, her small table cluttered with a teapot, a few biscuits, and that sheet of paper she'd been writing on. Her pen rested now, but the words she'd poured out seemed to linger in the air, heavy with meaning. I can still see her hands, weathered but steady, tracing the edge of the page as she spoke. She wasn't writing to demand her children's attention or to air her grievances. She was writing to understand, to make sense of herself, her children, and the quiet distance that had grown between them. I used to think I was too old to start over in any way, especially when it came to the people I love. But Mrs. Helen showed me that it's never too late to open your heart. She told me that first letter, the one she never sent, was like a conversation with herself. In it, she wrote about the days she missed her children, the moments she wondered if she'd done something to push them away. But as the words flowed, she began to see things differently. Her children weren't distant because they didn't care. Their lives were simply full, overflowing with work, children of their own, the kind of chaos she remembered from her own younger years. Instead of sinking into sadness, she decided to use that letter as a way to open her heart, to start a new kind of dialogue, even if it was just with herself at first. I asked her, "What good is a letter if you don't send it?" She smiled, her eyes twinkling like she'd discovered a secret. "When I wrote it, I felt lighter," she said. "I stopped feeling like a burden. I started thinking about what I could do to be closer to them." That was the first way she shared with me, the way of opening your heart by putting your feelings into words, even if they stay on the page. It's a way to reconnect, not by expecting others to change, but by finding clarity within yourself. If you've ever felt that quiet loneliness, the kind that settles in even when you're surrounded by people, you'll understand. There's a weight to those unspoken thoughts, especially after 60 or 70. You might worry about being judged, about bothering someone, about your feelings not matching anymore. But Mrs. Helen said that writing, whether it's a letter, a journal entry, or a few lines on a scrap of paper, is like giving yourself permission to feel. It helps you sort through the tangle of emotions, to figure out what you really want, and to find a way to reach out. She started small. After that unsent letter, she wrote a short note to her eldest daughter. It wasn't long, just a few lines. "I miss you, sweetheart. I made your favorite cookies today. Call me when you're free." She didn't expect much, didn't dare hope for a grand response. But a week later, her daughter called, and they talked for hours, about nothing and everything, the way they used to when her daughter was young. It wasn't the letter itself that worked magic. It was the door it opened, a door both of them had wanted to walk through but didn't know how to find. I thought of my own mother when I heard this. She used to stay silent when I didn't call, not because she was angry, but because she didn't want to intrude. One day, she sent me a text, just a few words, "Are you okay? I planted a new flower today." That simple message made me realize how much I'd been missing her, how much I needed to make time for her. If you're listening to this, maybe you've received a note like that from a parent, or maybe you've wanted to send one but held back. Maybe you felt that hesitation, that fear of being too much. Mrs. Helen said opening your heart doesn't have to be a grand gesture. It can be a text, a short letter, or a quiet word when your children visit. The key is to move past the fear of rejection, to let your heart speak, even in a whisper. I still remember her saying, "When I write, I'm not just talking to my kids. I'm telling myself I'm still worthy of love." Those words hit me, because they reminded me that love, at any age, starts with believing you deserve it. Her story didn't stop with those letters. After finding her voice through writing, she realized love isn't just about waiting for her children to reach out. Sometimes, she needed to step forward, to create moments where her family could come together. She began to think about the power of shared experiences, of bringing everyone back to the warmth of family. That's the second way she shared with me, the way of gathering loved ones, not through words alone, but through actions that say, "You're still home to me." I can still see her eyes light up as she told me about the first time she invited her family for dinner after years of silence. She wasn't sure they'd come, but she prepared anyway, putting her heart into every dish. Those moments, she said, changed everything. As the evening grew late, I listened to her, feeling the weight of her story, knowing it was leading us somewhere beautiful. "Let's keep going." Into the warmth of the table she sat, where hearts began to reconnect over a simple meal. The glow of the evening was softening, and I could still hear Mrs. Helen's voice, steady and warm, as she described her small kitchen coming to life. I pictured her there, moving with purpose, her hands stirring a pot of pumpkin soup, slicing apples for a pie her grandchildren loved. She called it, "the meal to start again," a dinner she prepared with every ounce of her heart, hoping to bring her family back to her table. I asked her, why go to all that trouble? Wouldn't a phone call do? She laughed, her eyes crinkling with a kind of joy that felt like wisdom. "I'm not just cooking," she said. "I'm inviting them back to the days when we were all together." Maybe you felt it too, the way a family meal can hold a kind of magic. When I was a child, my mother turned every dinner into a moment of connection, even if we were just talking about the weather or a silly thing I'd done at school. But as I grew older, as life pulled me in 100 directions, those meals became rare, and I realized I'd lost something precious. Mrs. Helen felt that too. She said when her children stopped calling as often, it wasn't just their voices she missed. It was the sound of forks clinking, the laughter around the table, the feeling of being a family in one place, if only for an hour. That's the second way she shared with me, bringing loved ones together through the simple act of a shared meal. She didn't wait for her children to invite her to their homes or suggest a gathering. She took the first step, even though it felt daunting. That first dinner she planned, she was nervous. She worried they'd be too busy, that they'd say no, that her effort would fall flat. But she pushed through, sending out invitations, setting the table, and preparing as if it were the most important evening of her life. What happened was nothing short of beautiful. Not everyone could come, but her eldest son and her granddaughter showed up. They sat around her old oak table, eating pumpkin soup and pie, and for the first time in years, her house filled with laughter. She told me it wasn't a miracle, but it was enough. Enough to remind her that her children still loved her, still wanted to be near her, they just needed a reason, a moment to come back to. That night, as they ate and talked, she felt the distance between them shrink, not because everything was perfect, but because they were together. I thought of my own family when she shared this. My attempts at family dinners haven't always been flawless. Sometimes the food burned, or someone was late, but every time we gathered, I felt my heart grow fuller. If you've ever sat around a table with the people you love, you'll understand. A meal isn't just food. It's a way to say, "I love you," without words, a way to rebuild what time has worn away. Mrs. Helen said the secret isn't in what you cook, but in the meaning you pour into it. She didn't have a fancy kitchen or a big budget, but she had love. She chose dishes that carried memories, soup her son used to ask for, pie her granddaughter would sneak seconds of. She even left an extra place at the table, just in case someone dropped by. Sometimes, she said, all they need is to know they're welcome. I still remember her eyes, bright with hope, as she described that night, the way it felt to hear her home alive again. I asked her how to start, especially if it's been years since the family gathered. She said to keep it simple. Invite your children for a light dinner, nothing elaborate. If they live far away, send them a small batch of their favorite dish with a note, "I made this for you, thinking of you." Those gestures, however small, carry a message: you're still here, still waiting, still loving. She said it's not about impressing anyone. It's about creating a space where love can breathe again. Her story made me realize that growing older doesn't mean waiting for others to come to you. Sometimes, you have to step forward, to set the table, to light the spark that brings everyone home. And from those meals, Mrs. Helen began to see something else. She wanted to do more than just gather her family, she wanted to understand them, to hear their stories, their struggles, their joys. I can still see her face as she told me about the night her son stayed late, helping her wash dishes, and opened up about his life. She didn't interrupt, didn't offer advice. She just listened, and in that quiet act, she found a new way to connect. That's the third way she shared with me, the way of becoming a listener, a friend, even at 75. As the stars came out that evening, I sat with her, feeling the weight of her words, knowing they were leading us to something deeper. Let's keep walking this path, into the moments where listening became her bridge to her children's hearts. The kitchen was quiet now, the clatter of dishes fading as the evening settled around us. I could still see Mrs. Helen's face, lit by the soft glow of a single lamp, as she told me about a moment that changed everything. It was after that first family dinner, the one she'd poured her heart into. Her son, John, stayed behind to help with the dishes, and in the stillness of that ordinary task, he began to talk. He spoke of long days at work, of sleepless nights worrying about his own children, of pressures he hadn't shared with anyone. Mrs. Helen didn't interrupt, didn't offer solutions. She just listened, her hands moving slowly over the plates, her heart wide open. When John looked at her, his eyes brimming, he said, "Thank you, Mom, for hearing me. I used to think I was too old to truly understand my children's world." At 60, 70, or beyond, their lives, full of technology, deadlines, and challenges I never faced, can feel like a foreign country. But Mrs. Helen showed me that love doesn't require understanding every detail. Sometimes, it's enough to listen, to let them know you're there, a steady presence in a chaotic world. That's the third way she shared with me, becoming a listener, a friend, even at 75. If you've ever felt a distance growing between you and your children, maybe you've wanted to reach out, to help, but worried you wouldn't know what to say. I remember my own mother once telling me, "I don't understand your job, but I know you're tired. I just want you to talk to me." It wasn't about fixing my problems. It was about her being there, ready to hear me. If you've ever longed for your children to open up, or if you've held back from asking because you feared you wouldn't keep up, you'll understand. Mrs. Helen said that night in the kitchen was a turning point. By listening to John, not as a mother with advice to give, but as a friend who simply cared, she created a space where he felt safe. He didn't need her to solve his problems. He needed her to see him, to hear him, to let him be himself. After that evening, John started calling more often, not out of duty, but because he wanted to. Sometimes he'd share a tough day at work, other times just a funny story about a movie he'd seen. Each call brought them closer, not because they solved anything grand, but because they were connected again. I asked her how she knew where to begin, especially when their relationship had grown so quiet. She said it starts with a simple question, one that doesn't demand or judge. "How's your day been?" or "Anything fun going on? Tell me about it." The key, she said, is to listen without jumping in, without trying to fix things right away. They don't need me to run their lives, she told me. They need to know I'm still here, still loving them, no matter what. I still remember her voice, soft but certain, as she said those words, her eyes reflecting a quiet strength. I thought of the times I'd called my mother, just to ramble about a day that felt too heavy. She didn't say much, but her silence was warm, like a hug through the phone. It made me realize how much I needed her, not for answers, but for her presence. If you're over 60, maybe you've wanted your children to share more, to let you into their world, but didn't know how to ask. Mrs. Helen said to be patient. One real moment of listening can shift everything, like a key turning in a long-locked door. Her story taught me that listening isn't just about hearing words. It's about hearing the things left unsaid, the worries, the hopes, the weight someone carries. And from that listening, Mrs. Helen began to dream bigger. She wanted to be more than a mother, more than a listener. She wanted to be someone her children could turn to, someone who showed them love in ways that felt tangible, personal, alive. I can still see her smile as she told me about the first time she sent a small gift to her granddaughter, a book she thought the girl might love. She didn't expect a grand reaction, but that little gesture opened a new chapter in their relationship. That's the fourth way she shared with me, the way of giving small, thoughtful gifts to say, "I'm thinking of you." As the night grew deeper, I sat with her, feeling the warmth of her story, knowing it was carrying us towards something beautiful. Let's keep going, into the moments where a simple gift became a bridge between generations. The night was deep now, the kind of quiet that feels like a blanket over the world. I could still see Mrs. Helen's hands, carefully wrapping a small package in brown paper, her fingers tying a simple ribbon around it. Inside was a children's book, one she'd read to her daughter years ago, now meant for her granddaughter. She wrote a short note to go with it, nothing grand, just a few words. "I thought you'd like this story. Love, Grandma." I asked her, "Why a book?" She smiled, her face soft in the lamplight. "Because I want to share a piece of me with her, like I did with her mom. Maybe you felt it too, that sense, at 60, 70, or 80, that you don't have much left to give. I used to think that way, watching my mother knit a scarf for my daughter, her hands slow but deliberate. But Mrs. Helen showed me that the smallest gifts, a book, a handwritten card, a jar of homemade jam, can carry the weight of 1,000 words. That's the fourth way she shared with me, using thoughtful, simple gifts to say, "I'm thinking of you." She told me that when she sent that book, she didn't expect much. She just wanted her granddaughter to know she was in her heart. But a few days later, the phone rang, and it was her granddaughter, bubbling with excitement about the story, asking questions, sharing bits of her own life. They talked for hours, and from that call grew a habit of exchanging letters, short, scribbled notes that became a thread between them. Mrs. Helen said it wasn't the book itself that mattered. It was the message behind it, "You're important to me." I still remember her eyes, bright with quiet joy, as she described those letters, each one a step closer to her granddaughter's world. I thought of my mother when she shared this. Once, she sent me a small jar of her peach preserves, tucked with a note, "Made this for you, like when you were little." That jar wasn't just food, it was a reminder that she was still there, still loving me in her quiet way. If you've ever received a small gift from a parent, you'll understand. It's not the thing itself, but the love it carries, the way it says, "I see you." And if you're over 60, maybe you've wanted to give something to your children or grandchildren, but hesitated, thinking it wouldn't matter. Mrs. Helen said it does. She said the gifts don't need to be fancy. A card with a few kind words, a recipe you've always made, a photo from their childhood with a note on the back, anything that holds a piece of you can touch a heart. The trick, she said, is to give without expecting anything back. When you give from love, she told me, love finds its way home. That small book opened a door, and through it, Mrs. Helen and her granddaughter built a bond that distance couldn't break. But her story didn't end with gifts. From those moments of giving, she began to see something bigger. She wanted to be more than a grandmother sending packages, more than a mother listening quietly. She wanted to be someone her family looked to, not just for love, but for inspiration. That's the fifth way she shared with me, living a life that lights the way for those you love. Mrs. Helen started small. She took better care of herself, not to turn back time, but to have the energy to love fully. She joined a painting class at the community center, her first try at art since she was a girl. She began walking every morning, not far, just enough to feel the sun on her face. She even bought a bright blue dress, one she'd never have dared wear before, and wore it to her next family dinner. I can still see her laugh as she told me about her granddaughter's reaction. "Grandma, you're so cool." That moment wasn't just about a dress. It was about showing her family that life at 75 could be vibrant, full, worth celebrating. She said living this way wasn't just for her. It was for her children, her grandchildren, to show them that love means staying engaged, staying curious, staying alive in every sense. Her son started calling more, not just to check in, but to ask about her painting, her walks, her life. They weren't just talking, they were learning from each other. I asked her how she found the courage to start. She said, "Do one thing each day that makes you smile. Walk a little, try something new, look in the mirror and say, I'm still here." When you love yourself, you teach your family how to love you. Mrs. Helen's story doesn't end with a perfect happily ever after, but with a spark of hope. She still writes letters, cooks meals, listens, sends small gifts, and lives with purpose. And every day, she feels less alone, knowing her heart beats in rhythm with those she loves. If you're listening, I want you to know this: growing older isn't about stepping back. It's about living true to your heart, your pace, your truth. You don't need to change the world, just change how you love, starting with yourself. Begin today. Write a note, cook a meal, listen, give a small gift, live a little brighter. If this story touched you, leave a comment below, share it with someone you love, and subscribe to Elderly Wisdom to keep finding ways to live beautifully. Today can be the first day of your most vibrant chapter. Live, love, and start now.